I'll sometimes receive a comment from a German and I'll think to myself, no, that wasn't German directness. That was just plain rudeness. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, it is so great to have you. I'm Antoinette, a New Zealander living in the beautiful wine region of Lower Franconia, Germany. I talk about all aspects of German culture through my eyes, the eyes of a New Zealander who has been living in Germany for over a decade now. I talk about things that I love about living in Germany, but I also talk about things that I don't love so much about living in Germany. First of all, something that I really appreciate, I've learnt to appreciate about German culture is German honesty. I love German honesty. I learnt pretty early on after moving to Germany that Germans are a lot more direct and a lot more honest than New Zealanders. We like to sugarcoat things because we don't like hurting people's feelings, and we would rather sort of talk around problems than actually directly address them. And in Germany, people are just a lot more direct. I soon learnt not to take this German directness personally because it's just part of German culture and German mentality, and it doesn't mean that that person doesn't like you or that you're doing something really bad. They're not trying to be rude, they're not trying to insult you, they are just more direct. And I learnt to appreciate this because you always know where you stand with Germans. There's no beating around the bush, and I really like this. It makes life so much easier when you know where you stand with people. But I'll sometimes receive a comment from a German and I'll think to myself, no, that wasn't German directness. That was just plain rudeness, and that was really disrespectful. And this is just some Germans. The majority of Germans are very direct, but they do it in a respectful way. But I quite often will receive comments that I think are rude, just straight out rude. I have to trust my instincts because I know a lot about German culture. I have lived in Germany, as I said, for over a decade, and I know what is rude, what is considered rude, and what is considered just German directness and not rude at all. So I'm going to be sharing some comments I have received over the years in Germany that I consider to be rude comments and very insensitive comments. This is a comment I have received many, many times since living in Germany, and I'm always really offended by it. So when I get into a conversation with Germans about what I do, if a German asks me, what is my profession, I will always tell them that I am a qualified secondary school teacher. So when I tell Germans this, I always get this kind of look of approval, like, oh, you're a teacher, you're educated. It's sort of like just a look of approval. And then they want to know more because I feel as though Germans by nature are very curious people, which I think is wonderful, but they don't just, leave it at that. You're a teacher. They want to know more, and they'll ask me, what subject do you teach? When I tell them that I am a secondary school art and design teacher, I can just see the look on their face. Not everybody, not every German, but it is just a pattern. They look really, I don't know if I should say disappointed, but just kind of like, oh, you're just an art teacher. I've even had Germans say to me, oh, you just teach art. And I'm like, yes, I'm an art and design teacher. It is a really valued subject in New Zealand high schools. And I just kind of see them lose interest, and they're just kind of like, oh, you're not really a teacher. I've learned since living in Germany that there is kind of a hierarchy when it comes to education, and art is not valued at all in Germany. Maybe in some areas, but in education, art is not considered education. In terms of education, like secondary education, art is basically nothing. As a creative-minded person, it was so disappointing for me to learn that art and, just the arts in general was so undervalued here in Germany, to the point where people actually say to me, oh, you're just an art teacher. I put everything into my teacher's training, and I am just as qualified as any teacher in New Zealand, any secondary school teacher. So the process I went through to become a qualified secondary school teacher was getting a bachelor's degree in visual arts and design, which took me 4 years. I made it into the bachelor's program a year early to do a foundation year, which wasn't actually counted towards my degree. But after my foundation year, I did 3 years of full-time study to get my bachelor's degree in visual arts and design, which involved a lot of academic writing. It was very challenging. It wasn't what people think, just painting and, designing, doing graphic design on my computer all day long. It involved a lot of academics, and it wasn't an easy degree. And then I decided that I wanted to give secondary teaching a go, and I did a postgraduate year in secondary teaching. So in my class, there were teaching students from all different subjects, from mathematics to English to French, just all different subjects. And, I was an art major, an art and design major. I went through the same teacher's training as all of these students, regardless of the subjects they would be teaching. I spent basically half of the year as a student teacher, doing placements in different high schools and actually teaching my subject, and I did a lot of academic writing. It was a very, very intense year. I managed to do really well, and I received a postgraduate diploma in secondary teaching, which allowed me to teach in New Zealand high schools. So when Germans make me feel like I am less than because I am a qualified art and design teacher rather than a qualified mathematics teacher, then it just, for me, how could that not be rude for someone to say, oh, you're just an art teacher? It's rude. It doesn't matter whether you blame it on German honesty. It's rude. And how is that meant to make me feel? That's what I mean with, some Germans are very insensitive with their comments. And I am proud of my qualification, and I think art and design is super, super important in education. In Germany, I just feel like there are a lot of academic snobs who think that you're only valuable if you have studied a subject like mathematics or science or something like that. How boring would the world be if everybody had a degree in mathematics or science or chemistry or something like that? Honestly, we need these people, of course we do, but we need a variety of people in the world. And art and design and music, it makes the world beautiful, a beautiful, interesting place to be in. And I think these subjects should be valued just as much as these academic subjects. Sorry for the change of background. As I was editing, I realized that there was no sound for basically half of the video, and my kids are home now, so I have run upstairs to finish filming or refilm. Okay, so this next comment I consider to be really rude, and I have received this comment multiple times since living in Germany, and it has to do with raising bilingual children. So if you watch my videos, you know that I am a mother of 3. My husband is Polish, but he grew up in Germany, and he considers German to be his mother tongue because he spent the majority of his life in Germany, but he does speak Polish fluently. He speaks Polish with his parents. We originally wanted to raise our children with the English, Polish, and German language. That was our initial goal. And when our children were born, we realized that it wasn't as easy as we had initially thought. And my husband ended up just speaking German with the children, and I ended up speaking English, my mother tongue. He had every intention to speak Polish with them, but it just turned out to be so much harder than he thought. And because he feels so comfortable speaking German, it just came naturally to him, and he just stuck with German, and English comes naturally to me. So our children are all bilingual in English and German, but unfortunately Polish didn't quite work out, and it's really disappointing because I would love for my children to also speak Polish. My husband would have loved that too. So anyway, when I'm out and about with my children, I always speak English with them and German with everybody else, but English with my children, because that is a way that we have been able to be consistent, not switching between languages. And I will often get really positive comments when Germans notice that my children are bilingual. They may be talking to me in English and then switching to German with their friends, and many Germans find this really fascinating and really cool, and they will comment and say, oh, that's so great that you speak English with your children and that they're so fluent in both languages and they're really interested. I'll tell them that I'm from New Zealand, and quite often they'll ask whether my husband is German, and my response will usually be yes and no. He's actually Polish. He was born in Poland, but he grew up in Germany, and German is his mother tongue. But usually they'll just be focused on the fact that my kids can speak English and German fluently. And I will usually add in that we really wanted the children to speak Polish as well, but it didn't quite work out. And I will often receive comments like, oh, Polish isn't important. The main thing is that they can speak English and German. I just find this comment really offensive. Somebody just straight out saying Polish isn't important. Like, it doesn't matter that your children don't speak Polish because they can speak English and German. You know, English is a more important language than Polish. In this case, I don't think these people are trying to be rude, but in my opinion, it is really rude. It is very socially just tone deaf. They don't think they're doing anything wrong. In fact, they probably think that it's a real compliment to me because my mother tongue is English, and they're saying, you know, how important English is and how great it is that I'm teaching my children English, like it's a real compliment. But for me, I don't take that as a compliment. I find it quite offensive that they are putting down Polish, my husband's, you know, first language, because to me, Polish is really important. It's important for my children's, you know, cultural identity. They are technically half Polish, and I think that would have been incredible if they could be fluent in Polish like my husband. And my husband has regrets not speaking Polish with them from birth. Honestly, I wish that they could speak Polish, and it's something that my daughter Amelia in particular is really interested in. She feels a real connection with Poland. We visit Poland every year. It would be amazing if my kids could talk with their cousins in Poland in Polish. For me, the Polish language is really important. It's just as important as English because my kids are half Polish. And for someone to tell me that's not important, and it hasn't just happened once. I think some Germans can lack sensitivity when it comes to things they're saying to people. And obviously, not all Germans are like this. I think many Germans would know instinctively not to say that, but it's happened quite a few times, so a lot of Germans think it's totally fine. I could go on and on about the subject, but I have to bring this video to an end. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it interesting, entertaining. If you enjoyed this video, I would love you to give it a big thumbs up. It really helps out my channel. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, then I would absolutely love you to consider subscribing. That would mean the world to me. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram, and I will see you again really soon. Bye.